Oh, take one. Three, two, one. Hey, welcome to the Contrarians. I'm Grant Arthur, your fill-in host. Marco couldn't make it today, so they got me. Well, I'll do. But today, we're going to look at Rush. We're going to just do a general discussion. We're going to look at your favorite albums, least favorite albums. Have you seen the band live? Just a general discussion. We've got a great Patreon crew here today, and we're just going to have a general discussion about Rush. So what I think we'll do, we'll just kind of go clockwise. We'll start out with Peter, and then Bill, and then Todd, and then me. And if we can just kind of keep it loose and just, we do what we do. It's the Contrarians, after all. All right, Peter, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on Rush, your favorite songs, least favorite songs?
Wonderful. Well, good morning. Nice to see everybody.
Good morning.
Great to be here again and talk about probably one of the most important bands in my musical journey as both a musician and as a listener. Rush's influence is unmeasurable to me. And their catalog is deep, it's expansive, it's creative, lots of peaks and valleys. But overall, I think it's one of the best catalogs of any band that I enjoy. So I was first introduced to Rush in 1976 when I was at a record store in my hometown, and I saw the album cover to All the World's a Stage. And at that time, that was the largest drum set I'd seen anybody ever have.
Yeah, I bet.
And when I looked at the back, and I was like, how many guys? Just three? Just a bunch of Marshalls and a bunch of amps and a cool stage set. I thought, why not? Took it home, and I've never stopped listening to it since. Instantly went back and grabbed the preceding studio records before that, and to say I was hooked is an understatement. And I don't even know where to start, actually. I'm just kind of tongue-tied here because there's just so much stuff. My favorite period of the band changes. It depends what kind of mood I'm in. And what's interesting about the band is that they have these rather stark groupings of records that kind of make up little periods or phases, or we'll use sectors if we want to use Rush terminology.
All Rush terminology here today, Peter. So
that's right. So we've got their first phase, but what I call the more hard rock phase. Their debut with Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, and 2112 and it's interesting is that they're also all segued by a live album that encapsulates that period, and then it moves on to something fresh. They move into what people would call the progressive stage: Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, and Moving Pictures. Then they get into whatever terminology you want to use. Is it the synth phase? Is it, punk phase, the new wave age, whatever you want to call it? Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and Hold Your Fire. Again, a live album. And the next phase, Presto, Roll the Bones, Counterparts, Test for Echo. And then we know that there's the break there for the tragic reasons, and we won't need to talk about that today. Where they come back and they finish out with Vapor Trails, Snakes and Arrows, and Clockwork Angels. I first saw the band in 1978 on the Hemispheres tour, and to this day, those who saw our top 3 concert experiences, that was by far, still to this day, the best concert I've ever seen. So since then, I saw them on Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, Signals, Grace Under Pressure. Was too busy in college after that, and then trying to find work. Saw them again on the Presto tour, and then saw them on R30. And R30 was the last time I saw them live. My favorite records, like I said, kind of fluctuate, but I think if I was to just be honest with myself, it's pretty straightforward. To me, it's the middle of the first three phases. Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves. Those are by far my favorite records. Although I do have a real deep love for both Signals and especially Grace Under Pressure, which I think is a wildly underrated record. And my least favorite, I'm not a big fan of the later era. I don't like the production. I think the band is muddy and they're thick. The compositions are not that distinct. And as Grant knows from our Aerosmith
no.
series, that I don't like doubling of lead vocal. And so what they've done to Geddy's voice in a production standpoint during that period is just not something I can listen to. So those are records that I own, but I'm not going back to them. So from everything from my drumming to my musicianship, everything, Rush's DNA is stamped all over it. And if I could have to pick just one record though, Desert Island.
Pick one. All right, pick your one Desert Island record and one record you just can't stand at all.
Okay.
Just for
my Desert Island record is All the World's a Stage.
Holy mackerel, really?
It's the first one that I got. I would rank the first studio records probably higher if it weren't for Neil and how strong he was in that middle section of Hemispheres and Farewell to Kings and everything.
Yeah.
It's, my gosh, the version of Bytor and 2112 and Anthem and Bastille Day. And to me, as a drummer, you would think it's all about Neil, but it's actually the thing that makes me always go back to All the World's a Stage is Geddy's bass playing. It's so huge that Rickenbacker just sounds like heaven. And that coupled with Neil and what Alex was doing just makes it just the seminal album for me. And the one I just will never put on again is Test for Echo. I just thought it was, yes. I will go on record. Right now. What's that?
What's that, Bill?
My wife's crying right now. That's her favorite album.
Oh, no.
Oh, my gosh. Peter, you can't make the wife cry for crying out loud. Try to rein it in a bit.
I know. From me, from a drummer standpoint, and maybe I'm completely off the rails versus what other drummers think, I am not a fan of post reinvent himself Neil Peart. I didn't like the changes he made. I didn't like his change in approach. The fact that he became more improvisational is wonderful from a musician standpoint, but to me, one of the absolute most unique and dynamic things about him up to that point was the fact that his drum parts were recreated nearly fill by fill every single tour, every year, over and over again, just like the great guitar solos and great vocal lines that you'd hear from a record, you'd get it every time. And when he started playing them differently, I wasn't a fan of that. And, I didn't think there was anything wrong with him before. There was no reason. I mean, from an artistic standpoint, you want to grow, and he wanted to grow. And I'm not going to begrudge him for that. But he was a different player, and I'll take old school Neil any day. And if I could only see one clip the rest of my life, it would be the 3 drum fills in Bytor and the Snow Dog during the Exit Stage Left video. It's simply perfection. So I absolutely adore this band, and I can never get enough of them. And I've played these records thousands of times. So that's my intro to Rush.
That's why we have Peter here.
Oh,
I'm just saying. There you go. Very extensive, well spoken. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Bill, let's go to you, and I want to give you a welcome to the Contrarians. It's a great community here. I know I haven't been on any shows with you yet, but welcome. Glad to have you here today. What is your take on Rush? And don't make your wife cry. Try.
No.
Okay.
After she got me hooked up with all the tech here, she went back to bed. So she's not.
Oh, well, we're fine then. She won't hear this.
She won't know till it airs later.
Right.
Putting aside the Beatles, that I kind of view them, to use the Duke Ellington term, as beyond category. Rush is my favorite band. I love these guys. I mean, I don't believe there's a bad album in the catalog, so I'm kind of a fanboy.
That's all right.
Unlike Peter, I came in a little later. I remember, say, 1984 or so, some of my friends in high school, not really friends, just acquaintances more, they were talking about Grace Under Pressure when it came out, and Distant Early Warning was being played on the radio. A little bit of Red Sector A was getting played, and I thought it was cool enough at the time, but I didn't really absorb it. I wasn't ready for it yet. I would listen to the rock stations at the time, and they would play, all the traditional hits from the 70s that the rock stations played then, the Closer to the Hearts and Working Man and Fly By Night and all that good stuff. And I enjoyed all of that, but it somehow didn't quite grab me. I wasn't an over-the-top huge fan yet. Fast forward to Counterparts. I heard Nobody's Hero on the radio, and something about that song just really got deep inside me. And that was kind of the beginning of my love affair with Neil as a lyricist, which also different to Peter. I come at it not as a musician, and not necessarily, I respect these guys. They're obviously great musicians, but I'm not a musician as much as I love music. So I have a bit of a different perspective on it. And like when we lost Neil, the thing that I lost was Neil the lyricist. He was a great drummer, but his lyrics have meant a great deal to so many of us, especially so many misfits. I mean, stuff like Subdivisions, obviously, that sort of thing, for all the outcast kids and all the nerds and geeks. And yeah, and something I found about his lyrics is they got better as he went along. And so while I think objectively, from a musical standpoint, I agree with Peter that basically that middle period there from 77 to 81 would be objectively their best, if we can say objectively about anything musical. But my favorite period is Counterparts all the way through to Clockwork Angels. I love all five of those.
Holy mackerel. Look at you.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Well, wouldn't you gentlemen agree that, and we talk about this on all our shows when we talk about bands' catalogs.
Yeah.
I think Rush, maybe more than any band, is timeline dependent.
Oh, yeah.
It really, really matters when you came into the mix.
Absolutely.
Because they're so different from periods to periods, as we pointed out, that I don't know if I could even remotely view the catalog the same way if I had to do it in a very strong retro version versus following it in line in time, in real time, as I went through it. Depending where you jump in, and it's interesting, Bill, in your case, that the ones you first heard didn't grab you until later. So did you go back and then all of a sudden go, oh, wait a second, there's a lot more here than I thought?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I filled in throughout the 90s. I filled in the rest of the catalog. There were some that still took me years. Power Windows, that took me a long time. It wasn't until maybe a decade ago that I really got that, and now it's one of my favorites. I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Bill. It took me a long time because when
really,
that came out, by that time I was like going, well, this isn't the band that I know and love. I mean, it was so slick and keyboard heavy, and I don't know, I didn't think that the tunes were quite as there. as Grace Under Pressure and what happened before. I didn't think that the songs were as good. That's what I saw, a big drop in songwriting for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Oh, when we get to Todd, we'll probably hear more about that. But so Bill, curious. So what would be your favorite album and what album do you least care for? I think it's fascinating to hear different people's aspects on this.
Well, I'll knock out the least favorite first. That's the debut.
Okay.
Easily. I still love it. It's a great hard rock album from the 70s.
Mhm.
And I mean, Working Man is overplayed as it is. I think is an amazing song, with or without Neil. John did great on the drums on there. I have no problem with his drumming. But I mean, without Neil, it's missing that extra. I say great album, just easily, if I had to kick one to the curb, that's the one that's going to go.
Okay.
My favorite, like Peter said, with the When We Jumped on Board, Counterparts means a great deal to me. So I'm tempted to go with that.
Hey, I can't argue with that. Counterparts is a great record.
And so I do want to give a little love for Test for Echo, though. Just that also has special meaning because my wife and I first saw Rush on that tour, and that's the first new album, of course, that she got into after we got together. And so that I mean, we did a little thing recently about top 5 albums that really are most important to you for various reasons, and that was one of the 5 albums overall in her life, that her comfort albums. So obviously to her it means a great deal too. So it has a kind of a connection for us. And the live, that first concert, if I remember correctly, they opened with Dreamline.
Yes.
And I definitely remember I had tears in my eyes as soon as they came out and took the stage. I didn't expect that reaction, but it really just overwhelmed me. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
That is incredible.
We saw them 5 times after that. We saw them on Vapor Trails. We got stuck in a traffic jam and missed the first 6 songs, which the internet, by then I already knew what I was missing, and I was pretty disgruntled because I realized what songs I wasn't going to hear, but it happens. And then we went to RushCon 4 in 2004 and saw them on not the Vapor Trails tour, the Feedback tour, basically.
Feedback, right.
And that gave me a new appreciation for the Vapor Trails material, which at the time I didn't appreciate Vapor Trails quite as much. I've come to really love it now, but when they played Earthshine there in Toronto on that tour, that live performance of it just really finally hooked me in and grabbed me. I still love that song. That may still be my favorite song from Vapor Trails. But and another important concert memory, the Time Machine tour. My son was around 12 at the time, and we took my son to see Rush, and of course he loves Rush too. So that was pretty special to have us all there and be playing air instruments out in the crowd with my wife and my son both. So that's obviously a very personal memory there. So and it was cool to hear the entire Moving Pictures. Camera Eye was pretty awesome to hear live, because who'd have ever thought we'd got that. But,
who would have ever thought? Well, Bill, that's a great insight. Welcome to the Contrarians. You'll fit in just fine here based on what I've seen here today.
I figured liking those last
Oh,
5
like,
the best would probably be contrarian enough.
Right. Yeah, you'll fit in just fine. I have no worries about you. Todd, welcome.
Thanks.
How are
I
you,
need
my
I
friend?
need a prop. I forgot a prop. Give me just one sec.
If you're going to get a prop, I should get a prop. But yeah, Bill, you'll be just fine.
Thanks, Grant.
Okay, I'm ready. Sorry, did I interrupt something?
No, I was just filling in space.
Okay.
Rapping with Bill.
All right.
Well,
So-
Todd, what do you got?
So I started with Rush in 1979. Young Todd, I was 15. And one of my friends, I had one friend, his name was Kent, and he bought everything. I don't know where he got his money, but he was the guy who bought stuff that we all checked out. And so he bought
Little
this
archives.
which
There you
of
go.
course is the first 3 albums.
Right.
And I stuck with I don't like his voice for about a month. That was me for about a month. And then finally I heard All the World's a Stage. And that, by the way, I wanted to say to Peter that it's amazing how complete All the World's a Stage is. You actually go into it. I actually went into it thinking, oh, well, stuff's going to be missing, but that's okay. And then you listen to it and you think, wow, nothing's missing.
Right.
You've
Right.
done everything. But I heard 2112 and that kind of turned me around. So then, of course, I heard Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, and that's all it took. And remember, Hemispheres at that time was the new Rush album. So
Right.
it's cool to think back to that time. But and then I remember my mom bought me Permanent Waves for a Valentine's Day gift. So I had to wait a month. It came out January 14th, and I got it on February 14th, 1980. But so that was just, I heard that and I thought, oh, something's happening here. I thought, this is different from Hemispheres, but not in a bad way. And so yeah, that was my journey. So we'll talk about favorite albums. This is number 1 for me, Power Windows. I've got 11 albums here that I consider all to be my favorite. So
Power Windows.
so yeah,
Man.
Power Windows is my favorite. And to piggyback off of what Grant said, I actually think that the songwriting in this period is the best songwriting. I think that that's when things got really good. And when I heard The Big Money, I mean, I can remember sitting with my friends in our apartment in college and seeing the MTV world premiere of The Big Money video and just being knocked out by it and being so excited because there was the little electronic version of the wood blocks, in the bridge. And I thought, oh, the wood blocks are back. But yeah, I love this album. I love I think Big Money Grand Design's Manhattan Project Marathon is probably the best sequence of 4 songs. Marathon's my favorite Rush song. I think that bridge and that choir and that key change at the end I think that's just the most. I can remember sitting with my roommates and playing that record and all of us sitting looking at each other going, what just happened? And then immediately playing it like 5 more times. So yeah, that's my favorite. I think I got to go with Grace as my number 2. One of the things I love about Grace Under Pressure is that the lyrics are great, but the bass pedals, I just love the use of the bass pedals. I just think it's super cool. I like Hold Your Fire song wise. I think Hold Your Fire is kind of a flawed album because of the way it sounds. I think it's got a really strange drum sound, and it took me a really long time to warm up to it. But I think Prime Mover and Mission are 2 of my favorite Rush songs. I think that even though Alex is trying to find his way amongst the more complicated arrangements, I think that's some of Alex's best work. I think Alex trying to reinvent himself to fit on these 3 albums, what ended up happening was a lot of really inspired stuff happened, I personally think. And so I think that's some of Alex's best playing, and most people would not. That would be a contrarian opinion right there. But I think him trying to reinvent himself and look for new sounds and new ways to fit into the arrangements, I think the results of that are very interesting, to say the least. I mean, if you can't say anything nice about it, I think you'd have to admit that it's interesting. And so from there, I think I probably go to this period, Moving Pictures and Permanent Waves. And then, it's hard not to say, one of the things that we say that Ryan from Rush Fans likes to say is, subjectively, this is probably the best Rush album.
Right.
But whether it's your favorite or not is another thing. But you have to give it credit for being way, 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 way up there. Signals I like a lot. I actually am a fan of Presto Roll the Bones.
Oh, yeah.
I think Presto is really interesting because it's a matter of them deciding to strip down a little bit, deciding to put more space in the recording and make things more guitar oriented and make it sound more like a trio, like a power trio. But at the same time, the way they use the keyboards to color things I think is really masterful. And some people complain about the mix on Presto and Roll the Bones, the Rupert Hine mix, but it's not that the drums aren't loud enough. I've heard people say you can't hear the drums, in Presto, but it's not that they're not loud enough. They're missing a little bottom end. But I think if you crank up Presto, you can hear the drums just fine.
That's a staple of Rupert's production.
Yeah, and I think he's a great producer. He's produced a lot of albums that I really like. Saga and and Howard Jones, whole bunch of stuff I really like.
Yeah.
Chain Lightning, I just think is fantastic. I like Superconductor. I love Anagram. Available Light, I think, is maybe one of their best closers. Great lyrics and a fantastic Neil Peart drum fill. I'm sure you probably know which one I'm talking about, the triplets. And yeah, I love that. Counterparts would probably be next. Counterparts, I wasn't sure about when it came out, but it's really grown on me a lot. Double Agent has become one of my favorite Rush songs. And so that would be there. And then, it's funny. You go to these two, you go to Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. And these, out of all the ones that I've picked, that's number 10 and 11, but that doesn't mean I don't think those albums are absolutely amazing, because they are. And so I certainly don't have anything bad to say about any track on either of them. So that's where I'm coming from as far as favorite albums. I have a lot of favorite Rush albums. And if I had to pick a favorite song, I think I already said it would be Marathon. Least favorite Rush albums, I think it has to be kind of a tie between the debut and Test for Echo, even though I still think Test for Echo is a good album. When I heard it, I was crushed because I'm a keyboard fan and the keyboards were gone. And so it's not there's keyboards credited, but they're buried in the mix. And so I was disappointed in that. I thought I couldn't understand why a band like Rush would take an important tool out of their toolbox. And I thought, don't go backwards. I thought, do something different with the keyboards, but don't axe them entirely. But I've warmed up to that album. The channel Rush Fans has this thing that they do called Deep Dive, where they go into an album, and there was one that Tim Derling was on from the Contrarians, and they talked about Test for Echo and the meaning of some of the songs, and I didn't appreciate some of the things about Test for Echo back then, and it made me reevaluate it in a whole new way. I've got to be honest that it sits near the bottom, but I like it much more now than I used to like it. The later period of Rush, I think I didn't have the reaction to Vapor Trails that a lot of people had, and what you might think I might have, being somebody that likes the keyboards in Rush. But I think that Vapor Trails is a really cool experimentation for them, because I think they tried to orchestrate with different things. Like they tried to orchestrate with Alex using harmonics on his guitar and things like that. So there are little flourishes and little things that kind of sparkle in the mix that are Rush trying to be like, okay, well, we took the keyboards out, but we're not going to be, just a guitar based drums, so it's there are a lot of really nice touches on that album that I think make it worthwhile. The last two albums I like more and more as the years go on. I always liked Clockwork Angels. I thought that when it came out, I liked it. When Snakes and Arrows came out, I really didn't like it at all. But I have found over the years that it grows on me more and more. I feel like Peter does, in that there's something about the songwriting that isn't quite, it's not 100% there for me. And but I think Clockwork Angels, there are parts of it that I think are just okay, but there are parts of it that I think are really dazzling. And I think the Garden is really special. And I'm glad that they went out on a song like that. But yeah, my appreciation for the last 3 Rush albums grows daily. And lately I've been listening to Snakes and Arrows a lot, but so that's where I've got everything. I've seen Rush, I think 9 times. The first time was Permanent Waves. So Peter has me beat. At the Omni in Atlanta, my mom had to drop us off and pick us up. And then I missed Moving Pictures. I was in band, and I think there was a football game that night or something like that. So I couldn't go to Moving Pictures. I had a friend pick me up a t-shirt. So I have the t-shirt, which I can't wear. And actually it's a jersey. It's this,
Oh yeah.
but it's gray and it has red sleeves. And so
The
yeah.
beauty of being in Chicago is we had 4 nights to choose from on that tour.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow, that's great. And then I saw Signals through Counterparts, and then
Oh, okay.
I didn't see him again until 2011. And I didn't go to R40, and that's a big regret of mine.
I went to
And-
R40.
Yeah, that's a big regret of mine. And I tried, after I had decided not to go, I tried to get tickets, after, reseller tickets, and they were through the roof. It was just not economically feasible for me to go. But even now though, I think I probably should have done that. I probably should have spent the $400 and gone. But hindsight.
I got to go to that show for free.
Hey,
And
Todd,
we were in the Nationwide, where they have all the clubhouse
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
They had a whole spread.
Wow.
I don't want to rub it in, but it was pretty good.
I'm sorry, Peter, what were you going to say?
I was, it's interesting for me, the period of Power Windows and Hold Your Fire. I'm a huge fan of live records based on my first choice.
Yeah.
I think the songwriting and the playing of those 2 albums really comes to life in A Show of Hands.
I do too.
And those are the versions that I prefer of those songs. And the fact that is available, that I can enjoy the material that's on there that I don't care for in its original incarnation, is a kind of a gift to the catalog, because I absolutely love them on that tour. And I think they sound great. And it does show a different kind of songwriting, and very melodic. There's a lot of great melodies there. And Alex isn't as buried as people think he is.
He's not. I hear people say you can't hear Alex, and I'll be like, you need to listen to that track again, because
He's there.
He's right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And at this stage, Neil was just in such a prime that, his playing, excuse me, throughout that period was remarkable.
Yeah. And I think A Show of Hands is a great live album. And I think it's amazing that those songs, as complicated they are so, like I said about All the World of Stage, it's amazing that they're as complete as they are. And I did a little shootout of my own a couple of years ago where I decided to pick the best live. This is before I was ever on any show on YouTube, but I decided to pick the best live album. And I thought Different Stages was probably going to win it, and Show of Hands won it. I listened to all the live albums from, the first one to the last one, and A Show of Hands has the best engineering. It has the best drum sound. And so, yeah.
Well,
Show of
and
Hands,
again, we talked about this, Grant, before about live albums when we were doing the Aerosmith. The beauty of that period on is that they are snapshots. They are captures of their tour at that time in a much more complete, full view presentation, which is why I love All the World's a Stage so much. Exit Stage Left may be my favorite live album if it wasn't just such a hodgepodge of tracks from here and there. And that period is so prolific and the songs were so long in a lot of cases, it was nowhere near what those concert experiences were like if you saw him on those tours. And I'll spare everybody. You can go look it up, or better yet, go listen to our past episodes and go listen to it. If Exit Stage Left had been, or they'd done a live album from the Hemispheres tour with the tracks that were on that, oh my goodness, and I think the other thing too is that I think Rush is probably the second or third ranked band in my catalog that I have the most bootlegs for. I've got so many of them I've lost track. And there are so many great intact concert performances from all of those tours where you can go back through and listen to them. They're in entirety. And two of them specifically, I have soundboard recordings of pre-tour rehearsal where they do the entire show of both the Roll the Bones and Counterparts tours, where they play the entire show, full stage, but all to soundboard. Everything is absolutely pristine, no audience in the way. And they're two of my most prized gems. They're just so enjoyable to listen to, and you can really hear every nuance. You can hear it echoing through the arena that they're in when they're doing the rehearsal. It's some pretty glorious stuff.
Wow.
But that era is really represented well by live recordings, I think.
Yeah. And I wanted to say one more thing before I'm done. I wanted to say that I can't imagine how anybody could not think that multitasking Geddy Lee is the most amazing thing. And that's why I like that period so much, because you got the pedals and the keyboards and he's got the guitar around his neck and he switches back and forth. I just think that's the coolest thing ever. And to their credit, they never stopped doing that, even though they made records where he was mainly playing the bass. He always had a keyboard rig and it was always something interesting and it had all props on it and they always played those songs. And so I never felt let down by any of the set lists.
Well, it's not like he was singing, hey, hey, my.
Right. Exactly.
I would like to see him do that, though.
Yeah, he could.
He could do that.
He's spitting out a lot of syllables there.
Yeah, but I agree. I agree about the multi-track thing too. I wanted to say that about what Peter said. That's kind of a mystery. I could see them doing that at the very end, but why they started doing that, a decade and a half ago, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know why they did that.
Well, Todd, I do have a brief question.
Okay.
You mentioned Power Windows as being your favorite record, and I admire that. That's a bold move. But when that came out, didn't you find that the production on that was a bit jarring compared to what came before?
No, I don't.
Okay, I'd like to hear.
Because I don't think it's that far away from Grace.
Oh, I think it's way far away from Grace.
Yeah, and I also think that The Big Money is one of their best openers, and it hits with a bang. And the drum sound is not optimum. It's not, it's not one of my favorite drum sounds. It's better than Hold Your Fire. I actually, as much as I love the music on Hold Your Fire, I have a really big problem with the drum sound. And I remember that's when he changed from Tama to Ludwig drums. And I remember thinking to myself, do Ludwig drums just suck because they sound so bad in this album? And I was like, I don't think that's it.
I've been playing.
That has nothing to do with it.
I've been playing Ludwig drums for 49 years. No, it's not.
I had friends that played him too. So I was like, I don't think that's it. It must be something else.
And the proof again goes right back to my point, because if you listen to his kit on Show of Hands, that drum set screams.
Yeah. There was something about the way they recorded that album.
There's nothing wrong with that drum kit.
Yeah, I'm going on a tangent now, but
No,
right. I don't. I thought the songs on Power Windows were so cool that I didn't go, oh, there's something happened that I don't like. I was 100% on board.
Wow.
If you would have gone from Signals to that, it would have been more jarring.
Yes. Yes.
Grace,
'Cause I
is a
think-
great-
I think
is a
Grace sits
great
kinda-
buffer
Yeah,
between
it's-
those two.
Grace
Grace-
sits on its own, sort of, as
Well, I think
there's anything
Grace
else
is-
like it.
I think Grace is closer to Signals than it is Power Windows.
Yeah.
Me personally.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
I think that Grace was the last great Rush album.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah. I'm one of these guys.
He is.
Every Rush discussion needs to have one of these guys. So okay.
Well, but Todd, I just want to say that our upbringing must have been very similar because I was first heard Rush. You said 77, right?
79.
79.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I beat you by 2 years.
You did.
Me and my two buddies, me and my buddy, I mean, I would make, I think, what was the first one I heard? 2112, maybe? Oh, man, it's kind of foggy because, you know, when you're young and you're taking everything in, it's just like you're overstimulated, you know, too much stimulus. But I remember making little cassette tapes on my home, you know, tape player and put it in my little boom box and walking around with my little boom box playing Hemispheres and 2112. Me and my buddy were so into it. So yeah, 77's where I came on. And I mean, it was just like Rush and the Beatles were pretty much it. It was just a great, I don't know. Geddy's voice never bothered me. I thought Alex was, you know, incredible. Of course, I was all into bass playing too. I thought Chris Squire was the bomb. Paul McCartney was the bomb. And of course, Geddy Lee was like from another planet. So that's where I came in on it. Now, as far as records go, I think that the whole Terry Brown era was it. I felt that Terry Brown was like the fifth member. I mean, the fourth member. Because I think Signals is brilliant. And I'm going to go and say Grace Under Pressure is brilliant. But I think that's the last hurrah. Because once I heard Power Windows, even though I can listen to Power Windows okay, I don't have any problem with the later stuff. I got into that more down the line. But at that moment in time, you know, 1985, it was like, wait, what? What's going on here? You know? And I didn't think that the songwriting was quite as good as what came before. Because before you had, you know, Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, the songwriting and the catchiness and the melodies were just top notch. Seems like after Power Windows, where the melodies just kind of wimped out. I know we always can't maintain this. We always aren't 25 forever. That's what John Lennon said. You know, they used to say John Lennon's best period was in 1965. He said, well, I can't be 25 forever. That was his peak. That's what everyone always said. Rush could never always maintain the same musical traits that I like. They're going to progress, you know.
It's anti their natural DNA as musicians.
Right.
It's so counterintuitive to their trajectory as artists.
Right.
They would have never done that. And, you know, we look at the periods of time, the first four records, you know, March 74 through April 76. That's not a long period of time. And then all of a sudden by September of 77, they're in a completely different pasture.
Yeah.
Farewell to Kings could not be more different than 2112.
I agree. Yeah. But, you know, they were on a constant course of change and growing. I can't hold that against them. We all have our favorite periods. My period's Terry Brown period, like a lot of people. That's what, I don't know. Probably because where I came in on it is where I am most familiar, I guess. You know, happens to all of us. But I would say my favorite album is Permanent Waves. I thought that was a masterpiece. I think Permanent Waves is the perfect blend of what was going to come and what came before. Even though you might say Moving Pictures might be a better record, but it's, you know.
Permanent Waves for me is where the lyrics start getting good. By the time you get to Natural Science, you're like, oh, okay, this guy's really getting good.
I think, but I mean, God, Jesus, my brain. Permanent Waves, the production, Neil's playing, Alex is playing, and Getty's playing, I think we're in peak form. Holy crap, that's a great record. It's all about playing on
I think it's a big jump sonically from Hemispheres.
Mm-hmm. Hemispheres used to be my favorite record, but over time, Permanent Waves is.
To me, the material on Hemispheres will always top everything. That's my go-to material wise. But it did all of a sudden have a much cleaner, more powerful presence as soon as Permanent Waves came out, and it just progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think the apex was Signals. I think Signals is probably the best sounding of the entire Terry era. And it's different. It's not as heavy or thick guitar wise, but overall sonics and the impact and the power and how Neil was progressing. It's staggering sonically, but you're right. There is that Permanent Waves is a strong line in the sand.
Yeah, I hear it, but on Signals, I hear a lot of Police on that record.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not bad.
I
But,
think
they were into the Police big time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Terry Brown walked away after Signals saying, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of the songs were getting too weird. And I can remember reading that and thinking, but you did such a great job on that.
He did a great job. It's one of my favorite records.
Here's what Terry said. He was taken aback by Neil's wanting to incorporate electronics into his drum kit. He's like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to become, and we have to think of, again, that era. There were a lot of bands now that were using Simmons drums and that type of thing as their main drum sound. And he didn't want it to become that. And he even admitted afterwards that when he saw how Neil was using it as an addition to his acoustic kit, that he maybe misunderstood or missed the mark, thinking that they were going to go so electronic that he was like, this is not where I want to go. So I think Neil's propensity for growth and wanting to bring in the electronics was probably one of the main things that Terry was like, I'm not sure I'm the guy for this.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that people tend to, because Getty stands behind the keyboards, they tend to blame him for all of the technology coming in. But really, all three of them wanted to do it. Neil wanted to do it. Alex wanted to get into all that processing and all that stuff. Nobody was twisting his arm to do that. I was reading the Wikipedia article for Presto, and one of the lines in the article said, Alex found making Presto so much more satisfying because there was more guitar in it. And then you click on the footnote and go to the article, and the article actually says that the interviewer asked him that, and his answer is actually, oh, those two albums before Presto were satisfying. So, it's like, so I think there's a lot of people jumping on, oh, Getty pushed Alex, and Alex said, oh, I've had enough of this synthesizer crap. I don't think that's really how
I don't think that ever happened.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
when you have a landscape of just three musicians, the sonic spectrum is wide open.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room, but having said that, it is instantly altered when one or more of the musicians changes their bass sound. And I mean BASE, and their core sound. Getty switching away from the Rickenbacker is a substantial point in their change in their sonics. Going into the Fender and then moving into the Wall and the other basses that he used, and even at the Steinberger for a while, they have different sonic principles. Alex moves away from humbuckers. He moves away from the DePaul and the 335. He goes to the Fenders. He goes to Strats that are by design thinner. He moves away from big stacks, goes to smaller, kind of not really a combo amp, but he goes to more niche kind of guitar amplification. So all of that changed. So it had to sound differently because their acoustic makeup had gone in a different direction. They were never going to sound as thick as they did in, say, Permanent Waves. When you can hear that and you still hear the guitar from the 2112 era, and you still hear the bass, from the early areas, because the Rick is still there. So that makes a huge difference as well. And that affects their recording process and how those records come out.
Yeah, and that kind of points to how I always look at this band, is that all Rush is good Rush. I think you would want to give them credit for doing that kind of experimentation.
Right.
And I think we're better off for it. And like I was saying before about the live recordings, you always got the right sounds live. And Alex played different guitars live for different sounds. And so if the humbucker sound was your favorite, you'd get it. So yeah, I think it was good that they made those changes. And then they sort of changed back. They sort of returned to some of their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can never go back in time.
No, can't. What is it again? You can't be 25 forever.
That's what John Lennon
20,
said.
yeah.
They had to progress. And, technology changes. And, think about all those new wave bands they are all influenced by. They're fitting right in there, even though they don't really sound new wave. But you can hear all those elements within their music during that, early 80s.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even something that if you weren't familiar with Rush's influences specifically, you would never believe that Bill Bruford's work or any of that kind of stuff would have any impact on Rush, but it did.
Mhm.
It had an enormous impact. And Bill was way ahead of the curve using electronic drums. And in fact, he, during that period, had gone to an entire Simmons drum kit. And, the way he used it was so creative. And when you get to something on like Grace, when they pull out a Red Sector A, when he does play all electronics, with a caveat, the difference to me was this is a nerd thing from my standpoint. So
this whole thing's been a nerd thing. Don't fool yourself.
That's okay. When Grace Under Pressure came out and he had the electronic kit, he still had an acoustic snare drum, he still had an acoustic bass drum, and he was still using real cymbals. So it was just the toms that were electronic. So when he's doing Red Sector A and he's doing all that beautiful hi-hat work, it's still on his 13-inch hi-hats that are crisp and really clean and acoustically delicious. And the fact that he could go, when he goes to the choruses, he could use his double ride pattern because he had a natural ride in front of him. His ride from his main kit is now off his left shoulder, and he can work backwards this way to go back and forth from his snare. So cymbal, snare, bass drum was still acoustic. It wasn't until later that all of a sudden everything went electronic. He moved away from the Simmons. He goes into the Roland drums later on, and that's an argument for another day. I don't think those have ever sounded as good as if you listen to Red Sector A from any live recording post Vapor Trails and listen to Red Sector A versus how Red Sector A sounds on the Grace Under Pressure tour video. They're absolutely worlds apart. There's something, again, they're analog. I mean, they're not really digital. They're analog. It's trying to use a modern keyboard to sound like an analog mini or micro moog. There's always a subtle difference because a digitization of an analog wave is not the same as a natural analog wave. They're never going to sound the same. And so when Neil went totally electronic, I had a problem with that. Now, he used it for a creative outlet. He clearly, most of his drum solos later on, all of the African hand drums and the industrial sounds and all the things he used after that were things that you just couldn't get off of real cymbals or a real bass drum or a real snare. So there was an evolution there. But the era, from Grace through Power Windows and Hold Your Fire, excuse me, still had some acoustic element to it, but but the toms themselves were electronic.
Yeah, and Neil's kit live. I mean, he had the electronic kit behind him, and the kit spun around.
Right.
And he played the electronic kit, but it was always clear that the kit was going to spin back around the other way. So it wasn't like anybody ever had the feeling of, oh, he's just going to come out with an electronic kit and that's just the new Neil Peart. It never felt that way at all.
Well, and in fact, in R40, he didn't bring any electronic kits at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny, if you have a drummer that is a really good drummer and can play an acoustic kit, somebody like Terry Bozzio. I saw, this is a short tangent. I promise it'll be short. I saw Missing Persons in 1984, and Terry Bozzio's kit was one bar above him and one bar right here and two pedals with nothing in front of them. And that was one of the most mesmerizing drum performances I've ever seen in my life. There's maybe 5 seconds of video of him playing that kit, but that was absolutely amazing. But it was Terry Bozzio, so you knew that he could play a real kit. So it was interesting and great to watch. But
I would have loved to have seen Missing Persons back in the day.
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular.
I did see Terry Bozzio play though. Live.
I hear she has a pretty good band now, but I don't know.
Well, Prescott Niles is playing bass. Check out that interview on Grant's Rock Warehouse. But I saw the Knack in 1988 when Terry was playing drums for him, and they were playing up at the Agora in Cleveland. There must have been 30 people in the crowd, and we've got Terry playing drums for them. He was amazing.
I saw the one-off pre-tour show of the UK reunion in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
There was just a small handful of us. It was Eddie, John, and Terry. That was epic.
I'll bet.
Was he playing Remo Rototoms by chance?
No, he had his whole DW kit. But he had those, I'm gonna get a tangent, nerd out again. He has those horrible Sabian radius cymbals that he makes, and they're good for solo compositions and things that he does when he plays his solo tours. But they're not very musical. They don't sustain very well. And so I thought the cymbals sounded hideous. If you had something that wanted to sustain, you didn't have one because all the cymbals are just basically white noise. That's what his sound is. It's very short, choppy, and cut off and dry. And he wasn't using traditional crashes or anything, which I think the songs needed. And you go back to listen to, UK's live, night after night or
Night After Night. Night After Night. You're right.
He's got real cymbals, and they sound so much better. But yeah, Terry's a freak.
Yeah, he's incredible. I was going to say, so my favorite. We just go on tangents on this show. Welcome to the
Remember
Contrarians.
Alice with the song about Alice.
That's right. So my favorite record's Permanent Ways. My least favorite is Vapor Trails because I think it's been brutally, like I've said before in whatever show, the production show we did on Contrarians, the guy who engineered that should be put in prison for what he did to that record. Just horrible sounding record.
It's amazing. And Paul Norfield, is one of the engineers that worked on that album, and he did a show of hands. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I was in 2002. I've never been a sound engineer, and I'm not one now, and I wasn't one then. But I remember hearing that album and thinking something's wrong.
It's not the mastering. People were going, "Oh, it's the mastering. It's all maximized." It wasn't that. Everything was distorted when they recorded it.
It's clipping.
And
you don't ever hear of, even from the cheapest bands with the lowest budgets. You don't ever hear that. So yeah.
Remind me, was that a digital album? Or was that analog?
I don't know.
I can't remember because you don't want digital clipping, for God's sakes.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah. I don't know.
Analog clipping I can handle, but not digital. Holy crap. And I can't stand it. I can't listen to it.
Now, what about the updated version?
It's better, but
it's much better.
Much better, but there are issues.
And despite all that, I still kind of like the way Vapor Trail sounds. Despite all that, I like that.
Do you like anything? Anything
there are aspects of it that I like, but that should never have come. This should never have come out. it should have been fixed before.
Well, we talked about it real briefly, and
Yeah.
you know, my favorite Rush records are basically 10. So I mean, if there's 19 studio albums, we're not going to count feedback or whatever, but
Right.
there's mine stops, and then I've got my first 10, and then I've got my post 10. Of the post 10, I always put Counterparts at the top. I think it is very strong. I think it's sonically really heavy. I like how it's mixed. I like how it's produced. I think the playing's great. And I enjoyed the songs on it. And that was a really, really strong tour from the shows that I saw online. And Neil especially was just crushing it. There's a Detroit show that's on YouTube. If you haven't seen that, that's just amazing. And I thought it was a good set list and everything, but I think Counterparts is just kind of is maybe a little bit overlooked because it kind of sits in that, by the time you get to Presto and Roll the Bones, there's a good chance some of the earlier fans have already jumped ship. It's not the post Neil returning. So Counterparts and Test for Echo kind of sit in its own little isolated little world, and they're really easy to fly over.
Yeah.
Having Test for Echo, my least favorite, tells you how I flew over that one. But not with Counterparts. And it was interesting how, and they're 3 years apart, basically. But they couldn't be more different. And I think Counterparts has a little more lineage to the previous 10 than the post 9.
Counterparts is my favorite Neil drum sound on a studio album.
Very
and
heavy.
It's
Very
also
cool.
and it's also a really good example of how I thought they should have continued in that de-emphasizing the keyboards but still having them. I think it's a really good example of how that can be done really tastefully and please everyone. And I wish Test for Echo was more like it.
I have a question for you guys overall, coming at the musician versus non-musician listening standpoint. I'm hearing you guys, you're hearing things and listening for things that I don't bother with because I don't pick up on it. So do you find that it's both a blessing and a curse to musicians listening to this stuff?
Yes.
Yes, it's a blessing and a curse. Yes.
I will admit, for all the masses of the world to hear, and I'll be honest, because it's my truth, I am the single worst listener to or understanding person lyrics wise. To me, lyrics are and I hate to use the word lowest. It's just, I have a hierarchy of other things that I listen to. I am notorious for getting lyrics wrong, even on songs I've been listening to for 45 years, 50 years. I get them wrong, always get them wrong. And I go back to something Ian Gillan said when he talked about songwriting. And he was talking specifically about songs like Space Trucking and something like that. And Neil would always talk about it as well, that sometimes the rhythm and the phrasing and the syllables used are sometimes more important than the word itself. Not in Neil's case. Neil's words were all picked very carefully and important, but in a lot of other bands, if it flows rhythmically, and Gillan was a master at that, we dance around Boring Alice, Borealis, his wordplay and his tongue play, but rhythmically it flows. I would memorize the rhythmic structure of the words, not so much what the actual word was. So I would obviously listen to the drums first, but then I'm learning the bass part, I'm learning the chord structure, I'm learning all of these things. I'm listening to the sonics, I'm listening to the production, I'm listening to Geddy's phrasing, and I can hum and sing every melody to every song I've learned. But don't put a gun to my head and tell me what actual words they're using, because I have to stop somewhere,
Right.
because the hard drive fills up and then I it's too much for me. So I admit that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I'm a woodwind player. I'm not a guitarist or a keyboardist, so I'm a saxophone player. So yes, I've got some of that built into me, and I'm constantly analyzing and trying to figure out the time signatures and stuff like that. It's mostly a blessing, but sometimes it kept me things like that, thinking that everything I listened to had to be really advanced and like Rush and stuff like that is what kept me away from Iron Maiden and Deep Purple for a big chunk of my life. And I've had to seriously reassess that and go back. And now I do listen to those things, but yeah.
Well, and Bill, you're exactly right. There is a whole generation of Rush fans who would tell you that above even the music and the artistic delivery of it, that it's the words spoken by Neil and sung by Geddy that are the connector. That's what they're reaching out for, and that's what they gravitate to. It's got a beautiful accompaniment to go with it, but the lyrics and the sentiment of the song and the perceived meaning of it, which is different for all of us, is what the glue is. That's what you're gravitating to, and that's what you hold on to. And neither one of them is right or wrong. And if it's the lyrics that you attach to, awesome. And if Neil is the guy that delivers them, even better. And you've got the other stuff that goes along with it, and you can decide to go how deep you want to go into it. I would surmise that Bill really doesn't care what kind of drum head Neil's using.
Oh, you are correct.
I do.
He doesn't care. He's not even remotely interested into any of that. He's like, did it connect with me or did it not? And that's the beauty of art, is that you can pick and choose. You can look at a painting and say it's the colors, or you can say, no, it's the shapes, or you can say any other thing and have it mean something to you that's different than what it means to somebody else.
And that's why I envy Bill, because he can look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
It's a totally different view that I'm totally foreign to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's one of the beautiful things about this band, though, because there are so many entry points for them and so many different ways to appreciate them. That's not true for a lot of other bands, I think.
No, that's absolutely. And that's what we mentioned earlier. It's, if you, and I don't know how anybody else views it, if you come in at Counterparts or Test for Echo, what does Fly By Night sound like to you? I don't know.
That's my second least favorite.
That's your second
there
least
you go. There you go.
Yeah, very
I
interesting.
still love it, but they were still trying to find something then. They were with Neil just joining the band at that point, I think they were still searching. They found some great stuff along the way there, but I don't think they were quite there yet.
Right.
Yeah, and that's totally unique to each of our own timelines. A lot of the older people like myself, and I don't want to generalize, Fly By Night's way up there. That's when they became Rush, and the fact that By Tour and some of the other things that are on there, which in my personal opinion, I think By Tour is the quintessential Rush song. But it is way different than what somebody else would pick.
Yeah.
Maybe to them it's Spirit of Radio. Maybe to them it's Signals. Subdivisions. It can totally be different, just depending on which era that you value the most and which one you go to. But for me, it would be By Tour, because I think that's when they all of a sudden became the Rush I love the most.
Yeah.
And they carried that on all the way through into Moving Pictures.
There you go.
Yeah. I told somebody recently that a big Rush fan that I liked, that Marathon was my favorite Rush song. And he said, but don't you think Xanadu is the best Rush song? And I went, yeah.
I saw that.
I kind of do. Yeah, that was on Great Take or Let's Debate.
I saw that. I thought that was funny. Well,
hard to
boys,
deny some things.
I just want to say this has been a great discussion. You know, we like to run things around an hour here on the Contrarians. And I do want to say, I think we've hit a moment in contrarian history where you can't get any more geeky. This is a new milestone in the Contrarians.
And Grant, I feel like we all talked over your part. So if you've got more stuff,
I'm the host with the most. It doesn't matter. I'm good. The main thing with this whole series is to have a good discussion. But I think we probably should wind this dog up. You know, we could talk Rush forever. So I want to thank Peter, Bill, and Todd for joining me today. It's too bad Marco couldn't be here, but as you can see, we did just fine. Please, on the Contrarians, please like, subscribe, check out all the videos. We have a merch page down there in the link. I mean, come on, kids, you know the Contrarians. Just keep supporting, like, subscribe, and always comment. So on behalf of the Contrarians, I'm Grant Arthur. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Todd. We'll wind this dog up and we'll do it again. Thanks. See ya. All right, how do I stop?